Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking in a bright light, but I can see most of you. My name is Ruud Priem. I'm the head of the Fine Arts Department and curator of fine arts here at the museum since June 2020, when I arrived from the Memory Museum in Bruges, where I was chief curator director first. And the subject of this evening is a subject that's really close to my heart. Those of you who follow my social media posts will immediately notice that there are a lot of portraits on there. And that is because one of the first things that I noticed when I came to work here and thought about what would make sense to add to the collection in terms of acquisitions was portraits. There was a really nice ensemble of landscapes, really nice historical paintings from scenes from mythology and history, still lifes also. But the museum had one portrait on display from its own collection, in addition to a few loans, and that seemed a really odd disbalance. So in the past 4 years, decided to concentrate more on this genre of portraits to restore this balance, to bring a more harmonious overview in the Luxembourg collection. It's important to note, I think also, that we collect not just works that are made in Luxembourg or have a Luxembourg topic, but works that complement the collection of the Luxembourg state. And the National Collection of Luxembourg, as all the other national collections around the world, have a lot of works from by international artists. And our job is to tell a nice and coherent, give a nice and coherent overview, in this case of European painting, and see what we are missing to tell a coherent story, to fill in the gaps and to add interesting works to these to this collection that was there. The work that you see here on display, I think, is absolutely one of the highlights in the as for the works that we found in the past years. It was acquired in, if I recall correctly, in 22. I saw it in a catalog of Sotheby's New York, and was immediately struck by the quality of this work. It has this strange frame that is made, constructed out of real bamboo plants, because these are the roots of the bamboo where the everything is chopped off except for the base, and then sawn in the middle, and then the two ends of a bamboo tree are glued together to create this African-looking frame. It's a painting signed by Match F, which stands for Frans van Match, and it's dated in 1897. Sotheby's at the time offered it as an anonymous portrait of an African gentleman, but before the auction took place at the museum, we were able to identify the sitter as William Donowa, a prince of the Ga people from the greater Accra region in Ghana. He's wearing a white piece of cloth, and his story is a really remarkable story. And that in itself, and I'm going back now to the reason why we are collecting portraits in the first place. Portraits have this quality of immediate communication. Why do people buy a portrait? Because the person speaks to them. And also, it's still an affordable, relatively affordable genre. Everybody likes to look at a landscape or still life, flowers, but portraits, if you have no connection to this person and do not know who she or he is, you might not buy a portrait for your collection to start with. Portrait has to be painted well. It has to be there has to be something in this portrait that you find interesting enough to look at it for a long period of time if you're a private collector. And in this case, the museum was also trying to get a better balance in our collection in terms of the role that we play in society. We don't want only middle-aged men with white collars in gold frames hanging on the wall, but also people with other cultural backgrounds, works by female artists, female sitters, a wider group of people represented on our walls and artists represented on our walls that better reflect the role that any museum, I think, should play in a society, and where the users of the museum, the Luxembourg taxpayers and all the other visitors, recognize their own interest and in fact also themselves in. This painting was painted by this Franz von Matsch, who is an Austrian artist. And when he was young, he had a friend who was also an artist. They shared. Sometimes they try to get models for their paintings, but not always that successful. And they seized the opportunity to see this man who, at that moment in 1897, was joined by a large group of people and was in Vienna at the invitation of an agent who contracted them to be exhibited in the Vienna Zoo, the Wiener Tiergarten. Well, at the time, that was a practice that was not unusual. Of course, now it's we have a totally different view of that practice. But there was a group of 70 warriors that came with William de Noah from Ghana. And in addition, several women and children. The two artists visited the Tiergarten, and William de Noah was painted en face, frontal, by Franz von Matsch, and his friend painted him en profile, from the side. And maybe you recognize the style of the other painting, because the friend of Franz von Matsch was no other than Gustav Klimt. And Klimt later, of course, later on became a really famous artist. Franz von Matsch at the time was also very well known. He was director of the Vienna Academy, but worked much more in an academic way. And the two of them fell out in later life. The painting on the right here, on the left here, in black and white, was photographed in 1928, so we know what it looks like. And we also know that the two paintings were exactly the same size, and also that the artists used exactly the same colors. So probably they used the same palette in between where they were sitting and painted him. So this is the group that was on exhibition at the Wiener Tiergarten in 1897. Die Goldküste und ihre Bewohner, Ashanti-Krieger. And the only person without a sword, a spear or gun, but with a peitsje, with a whip, is William de Noah here. Actually, he's even wearing the same robe in which he is portrayed by Von Matsch. I'm sorry. Of course, the Vienna newspaper was full of stories about these warriors, these Ashanti, as they were called. But we know that Willem de Noah also kept a diary and wrote letters home. And that is really remarkable and quite unique, because now we have the opportunity to study not only how they were received in Vienna, but what they were, how it was for them to be exhibited and what their experiences were in Vienna in 1897. So a very remarkable story, also on a topic that is very much studied and gets a lot of attention these days, post-colonial times. Of course, we hope that someday the other painting will resurface, and whoever buys it, it could be the Metropolitan, or I don't know, there's a small group of museums, I think, that could afford a painting like that. We certainly couldn't. But of course, any collection where that work would be landing, if ever there was going to be an exhibition on this particular story, a painting would be lent to that exhibition, of course with the request that the painting would then also come to Luxembourg and that we can also show both works together again here. So that's possibly an exciting prospect for the future when the other painting would resurface. But it's certainly an example of an exciting story connected to a wonderful portrait that, with a bit of luck, ended up in Luxembourg. Yeah, we were also really lucky to, with the collaboration of Danielle van Zadelhoff, a Dutch photographer who was kind enough to lend us this photograph. That really is a nice complement to the portrait of Willem de Noah and hangs next to it in the hanging upstairs on the fourth floor, where you will find photographs hanging next to paintings, hanging next to drawings, the occasional video work. So really a mix of materials and media, and two rooms where the faces of the museum, the portraits are concentrated from the modern and contemporary age. Another highlight in that particular section is this triptych by Francis Bacon, the only triptych by Francis Bacon in a wide radius of, I think, 100 or 150 kilometers. There's no other work by this artist. We were extremely happy to work together with the owner, a consortium that owns this triptych, the first of 5, depicting the partner, the lover of Francis Bacon, George Dyer. This is the first one, dating from 1962. They knew each other at the time only 4 months. And it's a wonderful example of how the passion, the internal struggle, the emotional state of the artist is reflected in even the treatment of paint, where the skin becomes almost flesh that's lying open, very dynamic handling of the paintbrush here. They are framed in such a way that you can really see, if you come close, you can really see how this texture is almost tangible. And it's a remarkable work of art that will be on display in the museum for the next 3 years, and really enters into dialogue with other works that are there. This is another clearer image of the three works together. They're not that large, but they work very monumental and have an absolute wall power. This boy by Owen Zerge, the first work by this Swedish painter entering the collection of the Nationalmusée, hangs next to it. And it's an example of what I was trying to explain at the beginning, that, yeah, you want to fill in the gaps. We don't have a lot of work that represents the Neue Sachlichkeit, which was an important art movement in the 20s and 30s of the 20th century. The problem is that a lot of, well, the best artists of a lot of the really good artists in this movement are German, and the Nazis had a specific preference for their style, and some of these artists were exhibiting in shows that were facilitated by the Nazis. And as a Nationalmuseum, you don't want that history in your museum. But Sweden is a relatively safe place. And there are interesting Swedish artists who painted in this style. And this particular work was actually a nice complement also with the big photograph that was hanging on the wall where now the triptych of Francis Bacon is hanging. This was there before and could almost be the same boy. This boy is a really nice photograph by Erwin Olaf that we acquired in 2016. And it's part of a series where children assume dominant or of positions of authority. This particular photo was taken in the Freemasons Lodge in Berlin. This is also a new name, a new face, a pastel portrait painted by François Guiguet. I had never heard of this artist, but I saw this portrait and I was immediately struck by the quality. He's an artist that ended up in Bordeaux, in the Bordeaux region, the south of France, and is quite well known in France itself. There's even a museum dedicated to his work, but he's now largely forgotten. He worked in the 20s and 30s of the 20th century. This portrait did not have a name nor a date, but I was able to study the work of Guiguet. I'm showing you a self-portrait of the man who was an excellent draughtsman, as you can see, and found this drawing in silver point showing the same girl, and that is dated 1924. So the painting, I think, is also from around this date. As it happened, this drawing was also offered at an auction, small auction in France, and we were able to acquire this as well. And also found the name of the girl because that name is inscribed on this portrait of the same girl, but slightly older, as you can see. Her face is a little bit older, but she's wearing the same dress that she's wearing in our pastel, and she's called there Jeanne. So we know she's called Jeanne, and that our work is from around 1925, 24. More French people on the wall next to it. This is by Jean Bonnier. And Jean Bonnier, also a relatively unknown artist. I just love the atmosphere of this painting. This man looks huge. It could be like Abraham Lincoln or something. If he would stand up, he would be 2 or 3 meters. But it shows an elderly couple and a young lady in an interior, what appears to be a shop. There's apparently shopkeepers. And we acquired it at a French auction. We buy almost exclusively at auctions because if you see something that is worthwhile for the collection and you're convinced of the quality, of the condition is okay, we mostly have the means to acquire interesting works, and in Luxembourg have the unique situation where there are not too many decision-making layers. So if you see something, you can decide actually rather quickly to go for a work. And like a lot of American museums, for instance, have a board of trustees. There are different groups of people that have to approve acquisition proposals, and they almost exclusively work with dealers as intermediaries. And of course, dealers have to make money too. They will also study the works, restore them, but that will add a considerable percentage, of course, to the cost of the painting. So both from a cost point of view, we try to make our budgets stretch as wide as possible and prefer, if we can, to buy directly at auctions. So most of the things that I will show you today were acquired via that route. So these people, as it turned out later, were remarkably similar to these people. And that is, of course, they are the same group of people, the father and the mother of the artist and his sister, in a more elegant interior in the Museum of Annecy, which was the place where, the city where Jean Bonnier lived. And in 1860, the date of the painting that we acquired, this region had just become part of France after it was part of Italy before. So there was a lot of changes in the local economy, where the local merchants and people with shops were dealing with an Italian network before. They were dealing with a French network soon after. And apparently things went very well for the family. They moved up on the social ladder. But the colleagues of the museum in Annecy didn't know our painting, and we were able to identify all the individuals on these works through some research, whereas we had bought it as an anonymous group. Further, on the fourth floor, still in our exhibition Collection Révélation, is this portrait of a lady by Walter Koch. It's dated 1912, as you can see above here. And at first I thought, when I first saw it, I thought it was a work by Fernand Houtler, who made works like this. And Houtler, this is a self-portrait of Houtler, this is a portrait of a lady that he made, was of course the most important artist from Switzerland at the time, at the same time in 1912. And there's no coincidence, because Walter Koch was, he had lung problems. So for health reasons, he emigrated from Germany and settled in Davos. So he lived in Switzerland and was influenced by Houtler a great deal, as is evident, of course, in the style of his painting. The painting had the original frame, and it's not particularly large, but it has a lot of presence. We were very lucky that it was overlooked by other collectors and museums, and I think we acquired it for €2,500 or for a really low amount, whereas a good painting by Hodler is €500,000. And so it's sometimes you just have to be lucky. And it has been hanging next to this work, this monumental self-portrait by Edwin Olaf from his series Unveils. This is portrait 11 from this series, made in 2020. As you can see, the tube under his nose, Erwin was sick too. He also had a lung disease. That's why I combined the two works next to each other. This photograph, with the support of the artist, was part of the exhibition Hans op de Beek and Erwin Olaf Inspired by Steichen that we organized in the end of 22, early 23. Unfortunately, Erwin died 3 months after the exhibition ended. The exhibition ended in June 23, and he died in not soon after. And this Luxembourg exhibition became the last that he did during his lifetime. That also gave us the impetus to acquire 6 large photographs by him, and we're very grateful that this portrait is now part of the permanent collection, and that we can keep him in Luxembourg this way. Laurent Flay and Emile Mayrichs by Van Rijsselbergen are hanging next to Koch and Erwin Olaf, and that's the little bridge I wanted to make to this other acquisition, also bought at an auction in New York, also Sotheby's. It's a pastel. It's huge. It's as big as a door. And it was painted by a German artist called Otto Scholderer. Scholderer was, although born in Germany, he lived and worked for a long time in Paris, where he was a close friend to all these now famous artists that were active there at the time: Henri Fontaine-Latour, Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, also writers like Émile Zola. His work also has a sort of Parisian flair to it. The muff is really of outstanding quality. If you look at it closely, it's really amazing. To illustrate what I just said, I'm showing you this atelier view of Henri Fontaine-Latour in Batignolles in 1870. With here, there's Émile Zola, there's Auguste Renoir, Edouard Manet, Claude Monet, and here, a little bit on the side, is Otto Scholderer. When he came to work in London, he found a small German enclave, a group of people who were living and working in London that he connected to. And Elisabeth Bruel, the sitter in this portrait, was the daughter of an antiquarian dealer, a dealer in antiquities from Frankfurt. He was an art dealer basically, and so he got to know her father, and she said for him, he made her portrait. Later on, she emigrated to Australia, and somehow the pastel ended up in New York. Well, talking about America, this is a portrait done by an American artist that is not yet on display. I'm not only showing you new faces that we can already show you, but also some new faces that will come to the exhibition rooms next year. This is one of them. It's a painting that we bought at an auction in Germany, East Germany. It is signed and dated by William Cheval in 1913, and the sitter was unknown, but there's a note at the back indicating that it would be Frau Brockhaus. And as you can see, there's a very nice tackle, Dachshund, here on the couch. She's looking attentively. It's a rather large painting. There's a little bit of flaking here that needs to be looked at, but for the rest, it's a really nice quality, and I think it will combine very well with the Van Rijsselberger paintings and the works by Walter Koch. The sitter, Marianne Brockhaus, was only daughter of the famous Brockhaus family of the encyclopedia, the Brockhaus, and she lived at Salomonstraße 17 in Leipzig almost all her life, in the Villa Brockhaus in Leipzig. So that's actually good to know, because this is the interior where we are seeing her here. In 1895, I think it was, a German etcher made her portrait here. I was able to know for sure that it was painted by William von Cheval. His actual name was Wilhelm von Schwiel, but that's a bit difficult to pronounce for fellow Americans, so he became William von Cheval, and he had a friend who was an architect, and they were working on the same project. This friend kept a diary, and the diary is now kept at the Forschungsinstitut of the Innsbruck University. And in this diary, Ketterer writes that to do this project in New York, he lived at the same house as a gentleman called Bitter and his brother-in-law, William von Cheval, and a maler, a painter. And later on, he wrote that he was celebrating the birthday of his brother on the 21st of May, 1913. And after that, he continued his travels in Europe, and he was planning to go über Leipzig, wo ich Chevals besuchte, die zu einem Besuche nach Europa gekommen waren. So this documents William Cheval, although normally active around Boston, we now know for sure that von Cheval was in Leipzig in 1913, in the same year that the painting we just saw was dated. So that is still coming. This is the view, this is a photograph I took this afternoon of how the portrait room looks now. There's a handful of portraits on display, but it all began with this work. At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that the museum had one work in its own collection, this really beautiful portrait done by Elisabeth Vigée-Lebrun. At the moment, our director, Michel Polfer, has brought it to Naples, where it's included in an exhibition on the collection of Lord Hamilton and his wife. Vigée-Lebrun's painting plays a role in that exhibition, so it's currently not in its normal place, but that gave us the opportunity to show you another new face that we acquired, I think, 2 months ago, or not too long ago, at the Parisian auction. It's a painting by a female painter, Monique Daniche, a painter from Strasbourg. Like many female painters from that era. Her father was also a painter, so she was trained by her father. But she had quite some success at the end of the 18th, early 19th century. This was done around 1800. I think the frame is certainly later. It will have had a more empire-style frame, but it's a good example of a good quality portrait done by a female painter depicting a female model, and it's really difficult to get those these days, because all the museums worldwide are looking for good quality works by female artists and preferably also female models. So the competition is quite stiff. All the happier we are that we managed to get it to Luxembourg. The sitter is Catherine Hübscher, and she's also known as Madame Sans Gêne. And that is because she was she used to be a laundry woman and married to a military man under Napoleon, who did really well for himself and ultimately became Maréchal de France. So he became the highest military officer in France, and she became a countess. So there was a steep rise on the social ladder. But she never forgot her humble background and always told things the way she honestly saw it. And that was a quality that was rare to find, apparently, for Napoleon Bonaparte at his court. So whenever he wanted an honest opinion, he would ask Catherine Hübscher, Madame Sans Gêne, to share her thoughts with him. She has been the subject of a few television series, of biographies. There are, I think, 2 movies made based on her life. So it's a fascinating biography, a fascinating woman, and it's also one of the goals, of course, of the museum to present such stories with our vicinity to France, and include this fine, good quality portrait and this story in our museum collection. I'm showing you again the image of the portrait and another painting by Monique Daniche to illustrate the quality of her work. This is a work in Strasbourg. This is an example of a painting that is not yet in our exhibition rooms. I think it has the size of a postcard. It's really small, I think 12 centimeters. It was offered at auction as a anonymous French 16th century painting, but coming from Bruges, or having spent 5 years in the Bruges museums, I thought I recognized the hand of Gilles Claessens, who also painted this little portrait. And if you compare especially the heads of the 2 men, look at the eyebrows, look at the way it is painted, there are quite some similarities. And in fact, our restorers have been researching our newly acquired painting and studied the underdrawing and the technique, and all the evidence indeed points to Gilles Claessens. And his oeuvre, his documented oeuvre, is very small. I think only 7 or 8 works. So it's really special that we found a nice example of an early Flemish portraiture, and have this also available now for international loan exhibitions, and to further our knowledge of Flemish portraiture of the 16th century. This image came in yesterday, also from the restorer. It's a very fresh face, very new face, so to speak. As you can see, the restoration is halfway. There's a thick layer of yellow varnish on this work, but underneath there's a beautiful male portrait, which was again offered, I think, in France again. There was as an anonymous man by an anonymous painter. That's the cheapest category you can find often at auctions. But there was a note on the back of the painting. Sorry, here. And the note was in German. And yeah, I mean, it's easy to imagine when you're a small French auction house and you're pressed for time, you don't read or speak French. It's easier to say it's anonymous and then to spend much research time on identifying either the sitter or the artist. But this label, in fact, enabled us to identify the sitter as Dr. William Marshall, and that was really an important figure, a physician in the Enlightenment. He wrote books like this, Unterricht zur Pflege der ledigen, Zwangeren, Mutter und Kinder und ihren besonderen Krankheiten und Zufällen. So on healthcare for women and children. He wrote books on the importance of good quality drinking water, so healthcare in general. And he was also, he came from Offenbach am Main. That's where he worked for some time, and that's how I found the artist, because in that town, close to Frankfurt, Georg Oswald May was active, and I'm certain that he is the author of this portrait. May is also the author of this portrait of Goethe, who in 1770, 1776, I think, visited Offenbach am Main quite often because he had a girlfriend there. And this portrait was done by May of Goethe at that time and ended up as as briefmarke, as a post stamp, later on on the German mail. Yeah, it's nice to. Whoops, I'm sorry. It's nice to see that under this thick yellow layer, a very attractive portrait is emerging. This gentleman hangs already in our exhibition rooms. It's painted by Jan van Gravestein, who is a Dutch painter active in The Hague. And the sitter wears, we don't know who this man is, we still don't know, but there he wears a medallion tied to his coat, and that shows a portrait of the Winter King and the Winter Queen of Bohemia. And we know that this medal was made in 1613, so the painting cannot be made before that date, and was generally only given to people very close to the court. And if you're very close to the king and queen, you're part of the really the elite, and you don't wear old-fashioned clothes. You wear the latest fashion, and this color is has a very specific shape that was actually only worn between 1610 and 1620. There are handbooks of European costumes that you can consult. So we have a date, so 1613 to 1620, let's say 1615 for this painting. but we're still trying to identify the sitter further. A lot of these stories connected to these portraits are, as you have heard or will hear later on, some sort of Sherlock Holmes stories. You search for circumstantial evidence and try to find enough information to identify either the artist or the sitter. But yeah, this is a really great painting. If you blow up the eye, for instance, it doesn't matter how large you make, it still keeps its presence and its quality. This is a portrait that we bought at TEFAF last year. So this year we bought something else, but last year we bought this portrait of Jan de Braai, who was one of the two most important painters in the mid-17th century from Haarlem, close to Amsterdam. It's in a really nice condition. It will come to the museum rooms shortly. And I knew this painting, recognized it because the collector that I studied for my PhD research, Lucretia van Winter, owned it in the past. She was a female collector from Amsterdam, married to Hendrik Six van Hillegom, and the Six family in Amsterdam still has an important private collection. They have a portrait of Jan Six by Rembrandt, among other things. But in 1832, Lucretia bought this portrait at an auction for their joint collection. Andries van Horen is the sitter, who was a burgomaster from Haarlem, and we know that it was still in Haarlem in that it was in Haarlem for a long time before it was auctioned to Lucretia van Winter, because there's a copy by a Haarlem artist after this painting that I'm showing you here. And there is a drawing that the concierge of Lucretia van Winter made. He made drawings after all her paintings in 1850, when it was in her collection, where it is shown again. That's how I recognized it. And the same man is shown here on a militia piece by Frans Hals, who was the other important painter in Haarlem. And he's shown again 10 years later or so in his marriage portrait, also by Frans Hals, a portrait that is now in Sao Paulo in Brazil. So he was portrayed by Frans Hals 2 times and by Jan de Braai 1 time in 3 different ages. And his wife was painted by Frans Hals, and his sister was painted also by Jan de Braai. And the nice thing is, I'm showing you the sister here. The sister was married to this gentleman. This portrait is again painted by Frans Hals, and the sister of our Andries van Horen was painted also by Jan de Braai, and she is part of the collection of the Villa Vauban. So after hundreds of years, brother and sister have come to live in the same city again. So that was a very nice coincidence. And I'm sure that our gentleman will travel to the Villa Vauban, and perhaps the sister will also travel to the Nationalmusée in the future. So here we are together, reunited in Luxembourg after all those years. This is also a painting that is not yet on our museum walls, but it has arrived, also bought in New York at an auction. It's a Flemish painting, and it has the initials FH for Frans Hals. It was, Frans Hals was originally Flemish before he emigrated to the north and settled in Haarlem, but it's not by Frans Hals. But experts at the time thought it was a work from his oeuvre, but yeah, the fact that they thought it was good enough to pass for a Frans Hals is already indicative of its quality. It's not a very friendly face. And when I saw this face in the catalog, I thought, I know this face. I've seen this face before. And this is again with the frame. And this was the face I was thinking of. It was a face that I saw in Italy, in a small auction in Florence. It's painted on panel and about, I think, 25 centimeters high. And it has the same moustache, the same frown, the same eyebrows. I compared it to this portrait here and that portrait there. I tried to buy this painting at the small auction in Italy when it was offered there, because I was convinced that it was a self-portrait of one of the 4 great Flemish painters of the Baroque. You have Rubens, you have Anthony van Dyck, Jacob Jordans, but I thought this was David Teniers II. David Teniers painted he was very successful. This is a formal portrait here in the corner, which shows him perhaps a little bit more beautiful than he actually was. This is his self-portrait on one of his many genre paintings when he was sitting in a cafe or in the company of people who are merrymaking and drinking. But this small portrait was probably how he really looked like. His honest features without the Instagram filter. And one of the major dealers in Old Masters, Bob Habold, apparently thought the same because he was the one who bought it. I became the underbidder. Bob bought it for his collection and offered it at TEFAF as a self-portrait by David Teniers II. And when you put these two together, you see, well, it may be the same person, but it's certainly not the same style. It's a different style. And but the beautiful thing is that David Teniers II was named after his father, who was also a painter, David Teniers I. But he had a son who was also painting, David Teniers III. I think that David Teniers III, who painted this portrait now in Kassel, might be the one who painted his father the way he really looked like, and is the author of this work. But that is still the subject of, it's all a hypothese yet, so this should be researched and compared with the data from the Kassel painting, and but it's an exciting possibility, and whoever it is certainly a very nice portrait, and we are really looking forward to showing it at the walls here in Luxembourg. But it would be spectacular if this would be a portrait by David Teniers II. Who knows? Last but not least, these two people, also on the 3rd floor, that are hanging there together. They were last seen together in 1876 in a big house in Leiden at the Rapenburg, where they were part of one and the same collection. After the owner of that collection died, at the house a sale took place, and the paintings were sold to different collectors, and their ways parted. I was looking for a painting by Nicolas Neufchâtel, a Flemish painter, for a future exhibition. And many moons ago, I was a curator of the Old Masters collection of the city of Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And there was a portrait exhibition in Nijmegen where a lot of the portraits came from castles in the province of Gelders. And in one of those castles, I was browsing the collection databases and came across this painting here, and immediately thought, hey, but I know this face. This man with the red beard, I've seen him before. And I wasn't mistaken, because this was the painting I remembered. And at the back of this painting, it was noted that this is a 17th century copy after a 16th century original. You can also see it has another quality than this painting. He also has one hand and not two hands. But this painting was with Mark Weiss, who's the major dealer in portraits in the UK. And he had attributed it to Nicolas Neuchâtel, but wasn't completely sure about the attribution. And the painting was with him already for a number of years. We offered to buy this work from him because it has a really nice quality, but also because thanks to this painting, we were able to identify the sitter. Because as you can see here, there's a family crest of arms. And at the back, the name of the sitter was written. And there was also, and that was another surprise, a second painting that belonged to it. It was a pair with a lady, a companion piece that was also based on a 16th century original, and also has a crest of arms above and identified. When I researched, I used to work for the Getty Provenance Index in Los Angeles, and I knew that they have a database where all the auction catalogs of German sales in the 20th century are digitized, and you can search on images, on keywords, and lo and behold, I found the image of the original 16th century painting that this work was made after. The companion piece to our man in the red beard, that turned out to be a painting by Willem Key. And Willem Key was one of the two major portrait painters in the 1560s, working in Antwerp for mainly the Spanish and the Catholic elites of the Netherlands. And when I researched further, I found the original back in a private collection in Amsterdam. As you can see, it had lost both arms. There are 3 panels, 1 through 3, but only the middle panel had survived. And the current owner was kind enough to lend it to the museum. I think, Liz, yesterday we renewed the contract, so it's going to be in our house for some more time. That was a very special moment that Maria van Loo, the wife of Adriaan van Leiden, Baron of the Holy Roman Empire, personal friend of Charles V, the emperor, Spanish emperor, was reunited. As you can see, at the time in Leiden, high officials were indeed wearing these sort of tiger skin robes, just like he is wearing. And that's how they came to hang together again after so many years, since 1876 in Luxembourg. We presented them to our visitors on the 14th of February, on Valentine's Day, 2 years ago. And yeah, they have been hanging there ever since. So that's one example out of many. I think I could talk all week about all several other portraits too that we were able to get to Luxembourg, but to make a more complete story, to restore a better balance, to strike a better balance in what we can show in our exhibition rooms. We started with one portrait by Figé Lebrun. We have now 20 to 30 portraits. Yeah, when you concentrate on one specific genre, auction houses and dealers notice this too. So you also get offered things that they think you are interested in. And that enables another, totally other way of working. It will not be, we will not continue this forever, of course, but I think for the early Renaissance period, for the 16th and 17th century, we now have a few really nice examples. Maybe a French portrait from the 18th century, for whoever is listening on the live stream, could still be a nice complement to our collection. Early 19th century as well. But it's been an interesting journey so far, and it's been a pleasure to introduce these new faces to you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but this was what I wanted to show you. Thank you. I believe I have a microphone if there are questions that I can bring to you. Thank you. Is there a question that I might answer? Or? Yeah, yeah, there used to be a couple. Wait. So there's 1, 2, 3 planks in this painting. Yeah, so only the middle part survived, and of course the frame is later. This frame is later too, but it belongs. Well, it's a correct style. But when we would buy this, we are interested in buying the portrait in the long run. Of course, we might indicate that it was had the same size, or we might choose to frame them identically, or to see how, or with an image next to the label to indicate how the portrait originally looked. There are different ways to go about it, but it's also interesting from a restoration point of view. Yeah? Do you reconstruct the elbows, or do you leave it like this? So that's still an ongoing debate, let's say. Sure, that's a very valid argument. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions? Well, if not, do go and see them. They're always happy to receive visits. And often speak to you if you look long enough. Some will be replaced. We will have some new faces next year. You already saw a few that are not yet on display, but will be. And as I mentioned, we will definitely also continue to look out for other nice portraits for future opportunities. Thank you again for visiting the museum, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks.